This is a highly sophisticated office computer, and to use it, all you have to do is learn this. This is Macintosh from Apple, also a highly sophisticated office computer, and to use it, all you have to do is learn this. Macintosh, the computer for the rest of us.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Player One Start. In this video, we're finally going to finish up this project I've been working on with the Macintosh. If you haven't seen the other parts in this series, I definitely recommend giving those a view before watching this video, so if you want to, you can see the links down in the description, or there should be something popping up above my head for you to click as well. That said, at the end of the last video, I kind of left on a cliffhanger 3 different problems I still have to solve. The first one, and the most important I think, is the screen. The second problem I have to solve is this retro bright that seems to be taking forever. And the final problem will be getting a device set up that can emulate the original Macintosh, or at least the Macintosh Plus. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and tackle the screen problem. Alright, so after 2 weeks of waiting, this screen that I ordered finally came in the mail. You will notice that this screen is actually much smaller than the one I had before, and that's because I'm not even going to risk taking this screen out of the bezel because I don't want to damage it, and I'm just going to scale the image to fit the entire screen. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and take everything out of the box here. This looks like the screen itself. Don't know what that cable is. There's the mount. Oh yeah, and this looks like cabling to be able to hook this up in my car if I was going to use the screen as like a backup camera or something. There's the DC power adapter. Sadly, it's not the same size as the other screen. I was hoping it would be. HDMI cable, the remote that I didn't drop this time, and yeah, there's some double-sided tape in case I was going to use it to stick the mount on the wall or something. Alright, to clear off my workbench here, I'm going to put everything I don't need back in the box. Alright, now let's take a look at this screen. It's interesting, it still has the screen protector on it. The other one did too. I don't know if that was just because they knew you were going to be handling the screen a lot before you actually started using it, or if they were just lazy and didn't want to take it off. But what's annoying is that it's actually behind the bezel too. Anyway, looking at the inputs here, we do have HDMI, regular AV, and VGA, just like the other monitor. We're only missing BNC, but that's alright, I wasn't planning on using that anyway. Oh yeah, and in case you were wondering what a BNC connector would be used for, it's most often I see used for security camera videos. At least it was in the past, because it was one of the only ways to run a long-distance cable for analog video. Alright, now that we have this completely out, let's go ahead and do a test fit. And yeah, you can see that this screen actually would fall through the front of the hole, but I think I have a way around this. So my solution for this is actually to design a mount for the screen to fit inside of the Mac. Now usually to do this, I would create a prototype first out of cardboard. And that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to take some measurements and then I'm going to cut this piece down to about the right size to mount this screen in. First, I'm going to get it to fit inside of the screen plate here, and then my goal is to cut out just a big enough viewing hole for the screen here, and the buttons so I can actually turn on the screen. Alright, and you'll notice here that this actually doesn't look the best. The lines aren't straight or anything, and that's just because this is just a prototype board. It doesn't need to be perfect, just enough to get me the right dimensions and measurements. But for now, I'm also going to coat this in electrical tape because I want it to look black so I can tell about what this is going to look like when it's done. And yeah, here we go. This is our first prototype piece. And when I do a test fit of everything, it looks like this is going to work. Yeah, I'll have to narrow this up a little bit so that the screen doesn't show as much through, but I think this actually looks pretty nice so far. Alright, and just to temporarily mount this to my prototype piece, I'm going to go ahead and electrical tape this to the back. Again, I don't recommend this as a permanent solution, just something so I can do some testing on this unit. As I'm doing this, I have to be careful not to cover up any of the vent holes in the back so the screen doesn't actually overheat. I also don't want to cover up the speakers because then the sound's going to be way too muffled. And since the sound's going to be coming from inside of the Mac case anyway, I want to make sure I don't have any more obstructions to the sound. And here I'm going to punch holes in the cardboard so I know exactly where the screws need to go in. Again, this will help me when designing the final piece. And then I'm going to make the holes a little bit bigger so they will actually fit the screws in. Alright, and then I'm going to reinforce the screen just a bit more so that it doesn't slide out. Again, I'm very nervous about damaging this screen during all of this testing, so I want to make sure that this screen is nice and secure in there so it doesn't break by falling out. Alright, and now for removing the screen protector. I went ahead and used some pliers even though I wanted to avoid doing this because I couldn't get this little tab to come up without some sort of extra grip on it. Eventually that came loose and I was able to pull the entire screen protector off. Alright, now I'm going to mount the screen into the case using the original screws and the mounting brackets that came with the other screen. And thanks to the nature of the cardboard not being as stiff as the final product will be, the screen bezel actually looks a little bit crooked, but this will work fine for testing purposes. Alright, so this is actually getting very exciting. It looks like this is going to work. I will have to replace this temporary mount with something more permanent later, but at least for now I can test things out to make sure it's actually going to work. Now that I'm all done with the front part of the case, let's go ahead and check on the retro bright. Well, the good news is I'm starting to see a lot more bubbles form on this, so it looks like it's back to doing its job as normal. It is going to take a lot more time for this to work, but I'm glad that it's still going. Alright, so again, it's going to take a while, but it looks like the process is at least still working again. So with this in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get started with setting up the hardware. Alright, so here's what I'm using. This is a Raspberry Pi Model 3, and I got this little kit, which includes a case, and a charger, and some heat sinks on here. Let's pull that cover off. So I believe this is the main CPU. This is probably running your video graphics. GPIO ports, headphone jack, HDMI. It says you can hook on a camera here, or display there. And on the side, you can see I have HDMI, audio separately in case I want to do that. And that's my power in. On the other side, I've got some USB ports and a LAN jack. I don't know if I'm going to use all these, but it's quite possible that I may use this in the future, so there is that. If you notice on the other side, it has a micro SD, and this is actually already an imaged card that I've been using, and I don't want to lose anything on here, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to swap the hard drive out. I'm going to take that card out, and I'm going to prep a new card with a Raspberry Pi boot image. To do this, it's very simple. You just go to one of the Raspberry Pi websites for the OS you're going to use. In this case, I'm using RetroPie, and they have detailed instructions on how to get a boot image prepped. I'm just using the app Apple Pie Baker to actually get the image onto the card. What I like about this is that it's actually pretty simple to do this. It doesn't take a huge amount of computer knowledge to get this far. And here's the card that I'm going to use now. This is the one I prepped. High capacity 16 gigabyte card. It was one of the cheapest ones out there. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in a keyboard and mouse. I'm going to get this powered up here. Alright, so that should just start booting. Alright, so yep, this is working exactly like it should. It'll boot RetroPie, and then this app called Emulation Station. This is actually the Linux app that is the basis of all the emulation this thing will do. Oh, but it looks like the software comes with an Amiga game, but I'm looking to do Macintosh, so I'm going to go ahead and get it set up for that. This will involve using another computer to remote into the directories on your card, and then you can just click and drag files over. You can also use a USB drive, but I prefer the network method. Unfortunately, this is where I ran into a snag. Macintosh is an experimental function or an optional core into this machine, and I couldn't quite get it working. I'm sure if I had enough time to play around with it I could, but in this case I'm not going to be able to use this app to emulate a Macintosh. So RetroPie is a piece of software for the Raspberry Pi that I'm actually very familiar with. If you watched any of my previous live streams, I actually emulate a lot of the software I stream on Raspberry Pi because it's very hard for me to get the original hardware to get up and running and look good enough and perform well enough for me to live stream it. I decided to do a completely new image in case I screwed something up on my old card, and it's a good thing I didn't because it looks like this isn't going to work, at least for me. However, all is not lost. I actually found another YouTuber who went through in very good detail how to set up a Raspberry Pi using something different. So I'm going to leave a link to that tutorial down in the description, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you what my results were. After reprepping the card, I was able to boot into an image of Raspbian, and it looks like this is going to work. Considering the limited resources that the Raspberry Pi has, it's actually very impressive they can get a GUI interface similar to what you would see on most other operating systems these days to run on this. And after getting the system prepped, it looks like, yes, I am able to boot into an emulated version of Macintosh System 7. For the particular emulator I'm using, I'm actually going to have to create my own hard disk and install the System 7 software. So I'm going to go ahead and speed through this so you can just kind of see this is actually sped up around 40 times the amount of time it actually took me to do this. And this particular emulator allows you to speed up the functions of everything to make the system run faster. So it won't take as much time as it did back in the 80s or early 90s to install this, but it still takes a significant amount of time. I'm also upgrading from System 7.0 to 7.5.5. One of the advantages to this is that I can actually use the color desktop interface to get color graphics. And as much as the black and white interface is nostalgic, I actually prefer the color graphics better. And since this machine's never going to look original, I think that this will be acceptable for my purposes. And now that I have the OS just about ready, I decided to go ahead and show the boot process with what it would have sounded like back in the 90s for this thing to boot up. Ah, pure nostalgia. Alright, things are picking up now, and I'm getting really excited. Let's go ahead and do a final check on the RetroBrite. Alright, so it's actually been 12 hours since I started the RetroBrite process on this. I'm actually running out of time on this project, so it looks like this is as far as I'm going to be able to make it. I'm actually hoping this is good enough for it to match what the rest of the case looks like. I really don't want that two-tone look in the plastic. And, well, this is strange, but this two-tone look in the plastic is actually not as evident in person than it is on the camera. It looks like my HDR has kicked in and is trying to differentiate those two colors, but it's actually very, very faint in person. The back of the case actually shows this a lot better, as the battery cover matches the back of the case with just a hint of being a little bit brighter. But overall, this is actually much better than the case looked before. Alright, it looks like everything is ready. Let's go ahead and get this thing assembled and fire it up. Wow, this is actually looking fantastic. This is a lot farther than I thought I would get with this project, and I'm very glad I have at least something working in here. However, I did run into one more problem. Between the process of actually taking apart the Raspberry Pi in my test setup and putting it inside the case, something happened to the SD card and everything got reset to default, and I kept coming across a whole bunch of corrupted directories, including everything I had set up for Macintosh emulation. So yes, I will have to redo all of that again for it to work. Unfortunately, I am out of time for this project, so right now I'm just using it as an extra little mini computer. Raspbian is actually a full-fledged OS for the Raspberry Pi, and is very simple and easy to use. But don't worry, I actually will take the time when I can to go back and put the emulation back on there, and I do plan to feature some gameplay in an upcoming video. However, to give you a little taste of what emulation I was able to get working, I wasn't really recording all of the games I was testing out, but I did record the process of installing ClarisWorks, which was the Office suite for Mac back in the day. This software is actually a little bit personally nostalgic to me because back in 4th grade when I had to do a book report, I wanted to type it out and my teacher wouldn't let me for fear that I would copy and paste someone else's. Even though we didn't really have the internet, I didn't even have a computer at home. They just wanted to make sure that I was the one who was actually doing it. But I had sloppy handwriting, and in fact I still do, so I'm a little bit self-conscious about it. And I really wanted to type it up, so the teacher, as a compromise, let me do it as long as I typed it right in front of her so she knew it was me actually doing it. So actually being able to get in there now and type up a little sample script just takes me back to that time when I was a kid and computers were still wondrous to me and the possibilities were just endless. That's a time that I really like to go back to, and it's making me really excited that this project is now complete. One other thing that's still outstanding is I do have to come up with a more permanent solution to mount the screen. And I'll have to teach myself how to do this, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And also, I don't really have access to a 3D printer at this time because, as of the recording of this video, we're still on the stay-at-home order. So I doubt this is the last time you see this project, but for now, I'm going to have to wrap things up here. And before I forget to say so, if you enjoyed seeing this series where I actually take a Macintosh, try to restore it, and then mod it, if you really like seeing videos like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon, because yes, most of the materials I used in this project were funded from the supporters on Patreon. So I definitely want to give you all on Patreon who have supported me so far a special thank you for making this project possible. And of course, if you do want to see more like this, don't forget to visit Patreon after this. I always leave a link at the end of the video and in the description. There are several more projects I would like to do that I have kind of floating around in my head, but I actually don't have the resources right now to get them going. So your support is much appreciated. That said, that is going to wrap things up for this video. Remember, if you like what you see, please give this video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what you liked about today's video, what you'd like to see in the future. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned because I have more content coming. I'll see you all in the next one. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.